Hello everyone and welcome to the Model Forms exercise lecture. Actually, in this lecture we will do some practice on our Pro 2 application that we have made in Django Level 2 section. So if you still don't have that around, you can just download the notes and in the course content section and grab that Pro 2 project folder from there. And remember from Django Level 2 that final project was to have that user that email HTML file, then use template tagging to display a list of all the users and their first name, their last name, and email information. So we had that for loop inside that template tagging, and then we displayed all that information directly from the model. We are going to change this to be a sign up page, and it's going to be connected to a model form that we previously discussed, so that the user goes to slash users signups on the user page, and once they hit submit, that information goes to the model and that user gets taken back to the home page. A great exercise would be to try this on your own first. So optionally you can attempt these exercise steps before viewing the rest of this lecture and to an attempt to try to this on your own. And these are the steps you are going to have to follow. You will need to create a model form dot in forms dot py. You will have to connect the forms in the template. Then you will need to edit user dot py to show the form and work with form in case there is a post, and then you will figure out how to save the data. That's something we did not talk about in the previous lecture. So as an exercise you will have to look up in the documentation how to save the data, and the way I wrote save here is a really big hint on how to do it of the form. So once you figure out that, then just verify the model is admin is registered. So once you hit submit, you can log in as an administrator and see that data is actually there inside the model. So again, I highly encourage you to try it out on your own, and you are going to need to look uh, at the documentation in order to do that successfully. If that's not easily really your speed and you don't feel that comfortable doing it, feel free to just continue watching this and code along with me. All right, so let's get started. Here I am at the code editor, and right now I have my Pro 2 project inside a folder called Django Level 3, and it has the app 2 also that is already installed. That was the second application we made. We take a look at this template. We have the index.html page, and then we have the users .html, and remember this was the template tagging we used earlier to actually display all the user information directly from the models from the database. And we are going to be replacing all of this with an actual form that connects directly to the models. So as a quick note, depending on when you actually download this, you may not have the models registered on your admin file. So make sure under app2 admin.py for this pro2 that you have these two lines here: app to that model, import users, and admin site register user. Remember, we need to register our models in order to see them when we log in as an administrator. All right, let's start off with the front end actually, and then we will come back to it later on as well. But here on the index page, we'll say welcome, go to the users too, and we'll say sign up. And I am actually going to add in here bootstrap, so this looks a little nicer. Okay, narrative copied and paste the link from bootstrap.com or getbootstrap.com. You can do the same. So I will put that on the index page, and I will also put it on the users page. And the next section of this course will actually learn how we can use one single basic template and then keep inheriting from the same template. So you don't have to keep writing so much HTML. You need to write only one time that HTML. And but for right now, we will have the same link in both of these files and on this user space. And this one is going to say, please sign up here. Okay. And I'm going to clear the rest of this since we will not be using it for now. Everything else that's in the body. And just to make this looks a little nicer, we will put it inside of a container class, and then we will grab this and put that in here. And then on the index page, that home page will put all of this into a container class as well. And in fact, let's put it all into a jumbotron just so it looks a little more home page. Then grab this stuff and we will put it in here. All right, looking good. And we'll come back to users.html and do some additional stuff in here with the actual form later on. But let's come to the forms, excuse me, app2 folder, okay, where we need to make our forms, okay. So form.py file, we'll say new file forms.py, okay. Hit enter and we should have the forms that py empty file here. Now what we need to do is import forms as we did last time. So we'll say from Django import forms, and then we also need to import our actual models. So we can say from dot, but I prefer actually naming it. So we'll say from app to, even though we are in the app to directory, don't need to actually say that. I could just say from dot, we'll say from app to models, import and then actual name of the models we intend to use. In this case, it's just user. And now it is time to create that class. And in this case, we will call this something like a new user, and we'll say forms dot and then we call model from instead of just normal form. So uh, typically before we were just using form, but if I actually want this to connect to a model and edit that data, I will have to use model form, and then we also have that inline class which is going to be this meta class. And if you want to do your own custom validation, then you would define a field here, something like whatever they are actually called, first name equals blah blah blah, the forms, the character field, and then eventually you would add in your validator. But right now we are not going to do any of that. We already covered how to do custom validation. So if you want to do that, that's fine. If you don't, that's also fine. And we will say class meta and we will create the model attribute. It should always be called model and then you assign it to whatever model this form happens to link to. In this case, it's just one form here, user. If we had another model to import, that would have its own class with its own form model or own model form, I should say. And then we have the field attribute, and we talked about the fields attribute in the previous lecture and the various ways to handle it. Since we are going to be using all the fields, we'll just use that special keyword underscore underscore all underscore underscore as a string. And as a quick note for this meta, you can either just do meta like this or have the open closed parenthesis for Python 3. That doesn't matter, it's basically the same thing. Okay, and now that we have that ready to go, let's go to our views.py file and make sure that it's connected to the forms properly, and that is going to do something if the user actually hits submit. So we'll come to views.py. And right now we just have our previous user that was returning information from the model, but instead we are going to be returning information directly from that form. So we will delete that right now, the index view. That's totally fine. We'll keep the same homepage returning index.html, but for users we are going to do something a little different. The first thing you have to do is actually make sure our form is working, which means we need to import it. So previously we were importing the models directly from there, and we would not be using that since we are not actually grabbing information from the model to post. So we are just going to grab stuff from the form. So we'll say from, in this case, app2 dot, and it's the form import, and we are going to import the new user. And just to make it really clear, let's actually call it a new user form that we don't get confused. So we'll come back to forms.py and let's call this new user form save that, and then in views we will call this new user form. That's a little clear to me, just so I don't get anything messed up. And we are also not using HTTP response anymore. That was one of the most basic things we learned about, so we'll comment that out. Okay, so we basically just have the render and the user form. Then we are going to be working with this, and let me grab some space here by collapsing the directory tree and also collapsing the terminal. We'll bring them back in a little bit, but the first thing I want to do is create an object or a variable here called form and assign it to an instance of that new user form. So create an instance of that new user form inside the users view here, and then we'll say this if the input request method is equal to post. Okay, then we are going to assign form to be equal to an instance of new user form, except we'll pass in request form or excuse me to request that post. Okay, and then we will scroll down to get a little more focus on this one views function here. So basically what we are saying is right now our form is an instance of that form class we just made. If the request method is equal to post, meaning someone hit submit on that form and is sending information back, we pass in the request first, and then we check if it is valid or not. And as we discussed before, you can have your own custom validation checks, but we will just do the automatic ones. So if the form is valid, meaning essentially they did not mess anything up when hitting the submit button, so an email was an email, okay, etc. So then here is the thing we did not cover. In order to save the form, you can say form dot save as a method, and what you can also do in order to commit it to the database is say commit is equal to true. So we'll save that. So we have if form is valid, form save commits true, and then after this what we are going to end up doing is returning, and we'll return the index page. Okay, so we'll return the index views and then pass in the request this thing. Okay, so this basically means if someone says post, meaning they give back information and it's valid. We will save that form using the same method of it, and then I'm going to return the index view of the request, which it will just return the render request of the home page. So this will basically take you back to the home page. Now what if they actually don't do anything? So we can say have a LL statement here, but sir the form is not valid. We can just say else part here, and there is lot of things you could do like raise an error, etc. You can give print right now. So we right now we will just print error, okay, from invalid. So we can say error from invalid. We would not actually end up experiencing this because we are not going to have an invalid form anymore. And then outside of this, we need to actually return something so that matches the actual page. So we'll say the users, and on the very first level of indentation inside of this views function. So I'm going to return, and we'll say render request and then pass in whenever our users pages it's under app2, and let's make sure that the folders matches. So under template we see app2, so that's actually capitalized the information. Although as a string passing it, I don't believe it makes a difference, but we can always just check on that. And okay, so app to remember templates, app to index HTML, and this goes to templates, app to, and we send back whatever our page is, and it was called users HTML, users.html. Then finally, we want to send back that context dictionary that actually contains the form, and it's very common just to give it the key form and then passing that form object, which is this guy. All right. So we'll save that. Now let's go back to users of HTML and fix this up so it contains the form. So the first thing we need to do is actually create that form tag. Okay, so we don't need to really worry about action right now because we are kind of handling that ourselves, not with the HTML, and we don't need to assign it a class. If you want to add more styling to it, you can do that. We definitely need to say method is post though, and either lowercase or uppercase works. I like putting it in uppercase just so it's very clear to me what's happening. And then we are going to do is use that template tagging and we will pass in form. Technically, that's all you need to do. But in order to get those nice line breaks, we can say as underscore p, so that way each actual widget of the form is a paragraph tag. And then remember, this is something beginning often forget is that CSRF tag or token. I should say we have CSRF underscore token and we need that in order to make sure the form is secure and just so it runs. Period. And then finally we need the input. So the input style is going to be or the type will be submit. We don't need to give it a name. What we can do is give it a class just since we have a bootstrap here. Okay, so let's make it look a little nicer. So we will give it a class btn button and then button primary and then finally the value. Whatever buttons actually going to show can be submit. All right, so hopefully we are taken care of everything. We have our users.html ready to go. Index looks good as well. Zomotron class, the URLs are already matched up from the forms previous iteration of this project. So we have users calling up to URLs and urls.py here looking good for users. And then we have our actual views. Okay, so this is probably the hardest part out of all, and this it's returning back to this dictionary which we are calling in the users HTML over here with form. So let's actually test this out and see if it all worked. I'm going to send into Pro 2. Okay, and then what I am going to do is say Python manage.py run server. If depending on how far you got in the previous Django level 2 Pro 2 folder, you may need to actually run the migration if you went along with me throughout the entire course. We are coding along correctly, then you should not need to make those migrations. But keep that in mind. Migration is very important if you have not do that before. But you may, uh, I should already have everything connected. So let's actually run the server. Let's make sure we don't get an error out. So that's a good sign. No error. Let's copy this and open that in the browser. Actually, we don't need to copy it because I already have it here on my URL. So just need to refresh. Okay, it will say welcome. Go to the users to sign up. Let's do that and we'll go to slash users, hit enter and now we get this. Please sign up here. Okay, looking pretty good. Let's make a really obvious first name and we'll say I am new first for the first name that we went. Okay, so you can give the last name also. I am last. So, okay, last name. We can say so my last name here, and then email will say it worked at whatever yahoo.com you can do. Worked at the rate yahoo.com. Hit enter, hit submit, and perfect. It took us back to the home page just like we thought it would, and we can see that it also sent a post. So that's looking pretty good right now. Now let's go to the admin side and make sure it all worked. So we'll go slash admin, and if you don't remember your username password from Django level 2 section, feel free to just use Python managed API, create super user. Remember that command. Okay, go to the backend. You can create super user again. You have to do is provide your username or email ID and type in your password twice. So hopefully I remember my password and I can directly log in. It just test password or something very simple and my username. Okay, so let me log in. I will log in. Looks like I did not remember my password. Okay, so let's actually create a new one in my case also. You probably are in the same boat as many times. Okay, so Python manage.py create super user. Once more, let's do practice and then email address, username, password. Okay, and then the password two times. Okay, now let's try this again. So we'll just run the server again. I'm going to refresh all the thing again. Let's try this and log in into the admin dashboard now with the same username that I have created little bit ago. Now we are able to perfectly log in into our dashboard and you can see we have users and when we go to the users, okay, so you can see the details here. We have the details also, but let me show you by opening that. Okay, in the app too. So this everything so simple and small, so no much difference. We will click on users over here and we will see we have bunch of users object. If you run the population script, you will also have a bunch of users object. The most recent one will be the one that top one which we have entered. So let's click on it. And I am the first. My last name it worked at yahoo.com. It's perfect. It is here. So now we can do whatever we want with this as a super user. But basically, we just showed that the user can input information and then we can access it in our models, which connects to a database. Okay. So that's the basic premises of using a model form. Alright. I hope you now really see the power and hopefully your mind, the gears are working here with you can essentially realize that you now have the power to start making almost any website you want to make. So you have the ability to gather information from the user, save it in your database and how to return it back to the user. You already have learned about this and only thing you need to do is style your website as looking as beautiful and you have done all the things and that's it. Okay.